Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Over the weekend, we saw two fighters who, in very contrasting ways, were good examples of probably how not to bring a fighter along. And I'm going to go through both of them and just tell you why I'm saying that. See if you agree with me or not. The first one, I've done a video on this guy, probably more than one video, is Anthony Yarde, who at the age of 33 still has not beaten a world-class fighter despite having two world title shots. And by the way, this is not I'm not having a go at him as an individual. I'm not besmirching his character. I think he's got talent. I think he's got athleticism. I think he's got power, and I think he's got the raw materials to beat world-class fighters. But when you look at his resume, and like I say, he's now 33. He turned pro 9.5 years ago, 2015, mid 2015 maybe. He still hasn't beaten anyone. I mean, his best win is probably Lyndon Arthur, and he had the two title fights. One against Kovalev when Kovalev was past his best. That was for the WBO title. Got knocked out in 11 rounds purely because of lack of experience, in my opinion. Hadn't done the 12, didn't know how to pace himself. Was in against a Kovalev who, in a few months after that, was knocked out by Canelo, who's certainly never been a light heavyweight in his life. And then, he lost to Lyndon Arthur, a split decision. Then he came back and beat Arthur in the rematch, stopped him in 4. 2 fights later, he's fighting Beterbiev. He gets knocked out in 8 rounds. And since then, that was at the start of 2023, January 2023. So we're talking over a year and a half. He's had 3 fights against nondescript opposition. And the last one, even though he had a chance to go on the Riyadh card and there's a dispute with Frank Warren and he could have fought, Joshua Buatsi, and he could still fight Joshua Buatsi if he wants to. But no, he ended up on a Sky card, on a Boxer card, fighting at the weekend against a guy called Ralph Vilkans, who came in with 17 wins, 1 defeat, a Latvian guy who turned out to be a lot better than any of us expected. In fact, Yarde had him on the floor with virtually the first punch. It was a right hand, put him over in the first 10 seconds. And then Vilkans got up. And in my opinion, the fight was a lot closer than 98-92, which is what Victor Loughlin thought it was. I thought, you can make a case for Vilkans having at least a draw. But anyway, that is one example of, in my opinion, how not to bring a fighter on. Because, going back to what I was saying about the Kovalev fight, Kovalev had plenty of wear and tear on him and would eventually, only a few months later, would lose to Canelo. So he was there for the taking. Kovalev was, he'd already been knocked out. Ward had stopped him. He was enjoying, was it his third stint as the WBO champ? And was, a very good fighter, but he was past his best. That was in 2019. Okay, when Yarde was 28. Now, I know Yarde didn't have a very extensive amateur background, but he's got such natural ability that you would think, had he been brought along through the old route, area, English, British, Commonwealth, European, I appreciate that, he didn't have many amateur fights, but maybe doing it that way, doing it in incremental steps, in climbing the ladder rung by rung, instead of trying to jump 3 or 4 rungs at a time, maybe that would have benefited him because he didn't have that many amateur fights. But instead, he tried to make these quantum leaps. He failed against Kovalev, and that was a very winnable fight. He almost had Kovalev out of there in the 6th round. And you will remember Tunde Ajayi saying, "Empty the tank," and all this sort of stuff, which probably isn't the best bit of advice you could give a fighter who's never done 12 rounds before. In the 6th round, empty the tank. Not really. And I think had he done, the incremental steps thing, the old route, he might well, and had he been in there with a few fighters who were sort of top 15 in the world and beaten them, or top 12, or dare I even say it, top 10, it would have prepared him better for shots against Kovalev and later on Beterbiev. Okay, Beterbiev might have beaten him anyway. Beterbiev is an extremely talented fighter and a very, very heavy-handed, skillful pressure fighter. But what I'm saying is Yarde could have done more with the right schooling, with the right preparation, and he didn't. He attempted the quantum leap thing, made a lot of money, but no. Fighting for a title is one thing. Winning it and hanging on to it is another. Which brings us to Adam Azim, who also fought at the weekend. Now, Azim is a lot younger than Yarde. He's 11 years younger, 22 years of age, orthodox fighter, currently 12-0 with 9 KOs, no draws, no defeats. He went in there with a shot-born O'Hara Davis. Davis came in with 25 wins and 3 defeats. He'd been bombed out in a round by the ancient Barroso. Just got caught cold, put on the floor twice, and it was stopped within 2 minutes. So he was shot-born, Davies. And to be honest with you, I mean, the fight went how I thought it was. I thought Azim would at least beat Davies on points, might stop him late. He stopped him in 8 rounds, knocked him out in 8 rounds. Had him on the floor in the 5th. He was over in the 8th and he was counted out, Davies. Azim, like I say, 22 years old, very, very fast hands, very fast. Trained by Shane McGuigan. And looking the part, but nevertheless, you see the flaws. You see the flaws that there. I don't think he's got his man strength yet either. He looks very sort of tall and thin. Even now, even though he's putting on weight gradually, he still looks perhaps a bit too brittle. Maybe, when he gets that physical strength, and he will inevitably move up a division or two, I think he'll be a better fighter and he might hold a shot better because there's a rumour going around the gyms that he don't hold a shot too well. But at 22, there's so much to work with, a great deal to work with. But here's the thing about Adam Azim. He had the sort of reverse. His career, in my opinion, was perhaps mismanaged in a sort of reverse of Anthony Yarde's career, because he was there was too much too soon, because lo and behold, he picked up in 2023, back into 2023, he picked up the EBU title. He beat Frank Petterjohn, stopped him in 10 rounds, and he defended it with a 5th round stoppage against Enoch Poulsen. Now, when you get to that level, EBU status, you are the champion, there's no going back. And if let's say you win the Southern Area title, or an area title, or the English title, and you give it up, not many people pay a lot of attention. They think, okay, you gave up the title, maybe you're going for something big. With the EBU title, you give that up and people are going to notice. And a couple of people who noticed him giving up that title were Dalton Smith and Eddie Hearn, because they both now claim that Adam Azim avoided Dalton Smith, and he did. And you know what? Avoiding him was probably for the best. But here's the problem. It now looks bad on Azim because he gave up that belt. He had the EBU title, one of the most prestigious titles. It gets you a world ranking. You get few good paychecks with it. You are, the king of Europe. That's not a bad status to have. And yes, he held the belt and he defended it once against, reasonable European level. But was he ready for world level? Was he even really ready for European level at 22? Probably not. Probably there is such a thing as too much too soon, because in 2022 he won the WBC youth title, some of those intercontinental youth titles, and then suddenly he's the EBU champ. What happened to area, English, British level? Why jump to European level? It wasn't what I would have done. I mean, even Anthony Joshua was a British champion before he challenged Charles Martin for the IBF belt. So, and he'd knocked out a previously undefeated Dillian White. So he'd done all right. At least he'd kind of dabbled at domestic level and beat a dangerous undefeated guy before jumping up to world level, jumping over the EBU title to world level. Azim didn't do any of that. He just suddenly he's EBU champ, and he's still a kid. You know, I don't mean that disparagingly. Again, I think he's a very, very good young prospect, but he is just that, a prospect. And some people have said, whenever I've talked to people about this, they say, yeah, but you look at Devin Haney, he was a champ at 22. Well, Adam Azim's not Devin Haney. People mature at their own rate. Some people, you know what I'm going to say now, don't you? The youngest ever world champion was Wilfred Benitez, 17 years of age. The youngest ever heavyweight champion was Mike Tyson at 20. Not everyone's like that. Lennox Lewis at 20 would have had the shit kicked out of him by Mike Tyson. But, you know, he didn't mature until he was in his late 20s. You could see it in his physicality. He filled out. People mature at different rates, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So I think there is an art to bringing on a fighter. You've got to know your fighter. I think Shane McGuigan, was quite right to, and I think it was Shane McGuigan that did this, to say to Azim, you're not ready for Dalton Smith. We're giving up the EBU. I think that going for the EBU, going for that was probably more boxer, Ben Shalom, Sky Sports tactic. I think Azim was sort of shunted in because an opportunity came up, but it was a bit too much. And I think it was probably, if I had to guess, and it is only a guess, it was probably Shane McGuigan who said, hang on, put the brakes on a little bit here. I want him to develop at his own speed. And that is a wise thing to do. That's why you have a trainer. And we know that Mr. Shalom is perhaps not the most experienced of promoters. So I don't really want to point fingers because I don't have any inside info, but I think Adam Azim is a terrific prospect, a very, very talented kid. And I think it's good that he's taken a slight step back. O'Hara Davies, he went 8 rounds with him. Davies very experienced, good name to have on your record. But it ain't Dalton Smith. Dalton Smith's young and hungry. And maybe that fight can be made. This is the thing, you see, timing is everything. You might say, I'll fight you, but I'll fight you when I'm ready. And if people want to take that as, well, you're saying you're not ready. I don't see any shame in someone saying, no, I'm not ready. Give me another couple of fights, I'll be ready. Just need to get a little bit more experience, I mean, people picked on Shalom when he pulled Fraser Clark out of the purse bids with Wardley initially. He said, no, he needs another 10-rounder. And then he got 10 rounds in against Marius Vac, wasn't it? And then he got another, 5 or 6 in against Dave Allen, a little run around, no big deal. And then you saw the first fight between Wardley and Clark. That was a split draw. Okay, in the rematch, he got blown out of the water in the opening round. But there is something for bringing fighters on. You can have too much too soon. You've got to bring fighters on sensibly. The best one that does this, the most skillful promoter at doing this, is Frank Warren. Because his fighters, I mean, Dubois, Billy Joe Saunders, these are the recent examples. It has been area British, area maybe national level, British, Commonwealth, European, and if they lose, they've at least got the experience. Like Dubois, of course, got stopped by Joe Joyce. Look at their respective careers now. Look at where Dubois is and where Joyce is. It was only a year and 3 or 4 months ago, whatever it was, that Dubois was getting knocked out by Usyk. Now look at him. But if he hadn't had those incremental steps, all that experience, traveling to America to fight for the WBA regular belt, he wouldn't have been prepared. You mature at your own rate. One size does not fit all. And so I think bringing on fighters is an art form in itself. Whatever you think of Frank Warren, no one does it better than Frank Warren. So what are your thoughts about this? Leave them below, of course. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit the like button, do all that good stuff to help us out. It's always appreciated. I appreciate your time, certainly. And yeah, I'm looking forward to reading what you've got to say. Much love to all of you, and bye for now.